Welcome to a special interview episode of They Live by Film. Adam here, just doing a quick introduction to the interview. This week, Chris was super lucky to sit down with Jared Auner, the head of e-commerce and social at Mondo Macabro. They had a really great conversation, and I hope you guys enjoy.
Okay, well, really lucky to have Jared Auner here from Mondo Macabro. Wears many hats. Primarily, kind of works on the web store and mail orders and social media for them. So, super excited to have this conversation, Jared. So, thanks so much for joining.
No problem. Really happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and you saw some of the questions I sent over. There's a lot of people on Reddit that are really excited about this too. Mondo Macabro fills this really interesting role, strictly speaking, from kind of the Reddit collector community now, here, where every time there's a label that comes up of, what are some other labels I should get into? The people that are the loudest are always the ones that are like, you have to go to Mondo Macabro. Like, people talking about them, and they do amazing work.
Yeah, we're sort of the collector, the video collector fiend label. I mean, we're not as well known as some of the bigger guys like Arrow or Vinegar Syndrome or Severin, but if you've fallen deep down into the well of collecting, you've probably hit your head on some of our stuff a few times. Yeah, and that's exciting to hear. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's about to change though, as people start looking for that more and more, right? But at the same time, you've been around for is it at least 20 years?
Yeah, Mondo Macabro has been around, I mean, I think, God, it might almost be 20 years this year. I think the first release may have come out either in 2001 or 2002.
Yeah.
In the UK, would have been Alucarda, the Mexican film Alucarda in the UK.
Yeah.
It came out 1 or 2 years later in the US.
Yeah, that's amazing. But previous to that, obviously, there's a long history even before that related to actually, like, literally writing the book on sort of genre cinema and world cinema, right? Like the crazy side of world cinema.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, that's Pete. That's Pete Toombs. He's the founder of Mondo Macabro. He founded it along with Andy Stark. Pete wrote the books Immoral Tales, which is about European films, and Mondo Macabro, which is about sort of more worldwide films, particularly Asia and South America. So he wrote those books, and at the same time, roughly around the same time, he was getting into having his own video labels in the UK. First VHS, of course, and then DVD, and that was Pay. If anyone is familiar with that, they put out a lot of European stuff and some of the Japanese Roman porno things. Some of the first time some of those things were released in the UK or anywhere outside of their home country. So that's kind of interesting. But yeah, so yeah, that's Pete. That's really who you should be interviewing. He's just so busy all the time that it's kind of just fallen to me to talk to. So I apologize for that.
No,
that of Pete Toombs, but
no, this is kind of turned into we just a quick background on us. So we started a podcast that literally was just doing kind of like a film club that we have on Reddit, and then we started a discussion based off of the films we're seeing, and the three of us happened to be collectors, and so we started talking about our own collections. And then after doing that for about 8 times or so, we're like, well, let's just reach out to the industry and see if anybody will kind of talk about, like, let's try to find some people that are actually representing these companies that we're buying from,
Yeah.
And so honestly, like, through this journey, which didn't really have a grand plan to begin with, it's been amazing to talk to people that are on the physical production side, like kind of like the operation side, I guess, of the business, some restoration folks, some marketing sales folks. Like, it's different perspectives that are all incredibly helpful in painting the picture of like what goes into these things that we buy for 15 to 40 bucks, depending on the format and the sale. So it's honestly, it's a really honor to speak to you. And so after they started the company, when did you kind of get plugged in?
So I mean, I was just a fan. I mean, I'm just like you or anyone else who might listen to this. I was just a fan and am still just a fan, really. I in the mid to late 2000s, I ran a blog called World Weird Cinema.
Okay.
That I know some people may have heard of. I mean, I was always surprised by the amount of people that would actually tell me they had read it here and there, but wasn't a big thing, and I didn't update it enough to ever become super famous with it or anything like that. But one of the things that I did do was try to push Mondo Macabro stuff. They were one of the labels that was really what I wanted to focus in on. Them and the Greek label Auner Films, who did Turkish films. They did exclusively Turkish films, and sadly, the guy who ran that label died about 11, 12 years ago. So they're not around anymore. But in the course of doing that, I got in contact with Mondo Macabro. I think initially I talked to Andy Stark, who was Pete's partner, and who at that time was doing a lot of the technical stuff and a lot of the website stuff and a lot of the answering dumb emails from fans like me. So he was the first person that I talked to, and sort of developed a relationship. They let me like break the news on a few of their DVD releases, particularly that very heady kind of last days of the DVD cult movie gold rush in like 2006 to 2008, before everything crashed in the economic recession in 2009. So I got to know them there, and then there was also a message forum that was particularly geared towards like weird cult foreign films, called Cinehound. It was run from Greece, and it was a very international cast of characters of just weirdos who just found each other. A lot of them like VHS collectors, people who collect random weird copies of Halloween on VHS or whatever, that. So it was kind of those two groups, and it was a fun place to learn about like Indian films or Greek films or Turkish films, other Middle Eastern things, and that was very much what I was into at that time too. So and somebody who also joined was Pete Toombs, and he was very open, answered questions for everybody, was very interactive with everybody. And I started messaging him privately, and we started talking about things a lot. And I stopped doing the blog, the World Weird Cinema blog, about 2011 or so. And by that time, the big heyday of the DVD was done by that time. Yeah. It kind of sunk pretty low. It was before Blu-ray really came in, or it was just getting started at that time. And at that time, Mondo was just doing maybe like 1 or 2 releases a year, and nobody was noticing them, basically. Like I would go on message forums, and people had not even heard that they were doing, stuff like Don't Open Till Christmas or Girl in Room 2A, kind of the things that they were doing at that time.
All right.
And so I said, do you want somebody to run your social media? Do you want somebody to run your blog for you? Do you want somebody to create? Facebook was still fairly new. I was like, do you want somebody to create a Facebook page for you? Because they didn't have one. They didn't really have any sort of social media. And then it just started from there. He said yes, and we just went from there. And then about 2015 or so is when I started working monetarily for them, and started running the website, the web store, excuse me, and doing all their mail order and stuff like that.
And when did the Fan was one of the early Blu-rays, right? Does that sound?
Yeah, it was. I think it was the third Blu-ray release. The first Blu-ray release was The Slave. The second one, the Italian movie The Slave. The second one was the British indie horror movie called The Devil's Business.
Okay.
Era, one of the fewer newer movies that we've done. And they both just came out as like, they didn't get limited editions. They both just came out as like normal retail. So the third Blu-ray that was done was exactly The Fan. And it was the first red case release. And that was sort of my initial contribution, my idea was because Mondo had done red cases for their DVD releases in
Yeah.
the thousands. And so, you know, the first Blu-rays that came out, they just came out in the normal slim, you know, blue cases. And I thought, well, you know, for the hardcore fans who remember the red case stuff from back in the day, why don't we put out a red case edition and we'll just sell it directly on the website, and you know, and make more money. I mean, that's how all the labels make money.
Sure.
Is selling direct, because you don't really make a ton of money selling through Amazon or other, you know, e-tailers. So that was my idea, was like, why don't we do these red case releases? So yeah, so you can blame, if you don't like them, you can blame me, anyone who's out there. But
Yeah. Any social media channel, you're the one checking it, right? So they can find you anyway.
yeah,
But but it's kind of a brilliant idea, right? Because as I speak to more and more labels, one of the things that I think is super interesting is that, you know, these limited editions basically fund like additional work, right? Like the urgency that these limited editions create equals dollars that y'all can reinvest into future titles and restorations and like all these other things you do, right?
well, exactly. I mean, there's been a real knock-on effect from being able to successfully sell these things directly to us growing and being able to do more releases per year. Um,
Yeah,
and
I mean, that what a
continue
great example. January.
to put food on the table, because that's how I that's how I make my money, is directly from the website. So yeah.
Oh, okay. So buy from the website. Feed Jared's kids. Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't have to feed
feed my
Jared.
cats. If you want to keep my cats fat and me fat, uh, please continue to buy from the website.
Okay, so speaking of, I guess, more releases, one of the things that I think is super interesting is as time goes on, I feel like even for the, because you mentioned that people have to go pretty deep down like the genre rabbit holes to find out the titles that y'all are like to get into the titles y'all are producing and stuff. But you know, all of a sudden now you're putting out like Hiruko the Goblin, right?
Yeah. Right.
Like I wouldn't necessarily say that that's where you're uh, playing all the time now. So are you intentionally kind of getting into these like more established directors, more established catalogs? Like you have a lot of really well-known Italian directors in your catalog, right? Like, are you trying to do more of this now? Is there kind of a yeah intentionality there?
Well, I mean, I think there is, especially in this era, the Blu-ray era, there is a concerted effort on our part to sort of balance better known films with the more esoteric stuff.
Okay.
So I mean, the Blu-ray release we did after The Fan, way back in the day, was Lizard in a Woman's Skin, the Lucio Fulci.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. So I mean, and that was a big deal, and I think probably that turned on more people than almost any other film we've done, as far as just like cluing people in who weren't previously aware of Mondo in the DVD era. All the new fans that were suddenly coming in with the Blu-ray stuff, and were collecting mostly horror films or Italian horror films and gialli. I mean, I think that was really the one, and we love the film. I mean, just as a film, we just think it's great. It's one of my favorite Fulci films. But there was I mean, I have to admit, a very calculated conception that it's something that is going to sell and increase awareness of our brand if we put this movie out.
And that must have kind of felt good for you because I think we were talking about this before we started recording, but Fulci was one of the big sort of characters that got you into a different side of cinema, anyways, right?
It was, yeah. I mean, Fulci was like the sort of the cult movie director that I explored first. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was a few years into that journey until I found his more like his 70s stuff, like his gialli and stuff. But yeah, so I mean, it was very exciting to, I mean, I co-produced that release. I mean, I helped put together the extras and everything. And so that was just very exciting to be able to be in that process for a filmmaker that, I mean, it's not out of the question to say that his work changed my life, essentially. So it's exciting. And we were able to do another Fulci film eventually, Perversion Story,
Yeah.
one on top of the other. which is not necessarily one of my favorites, but it is a really, really good film. And again, very exciting to be able to put it out there.
What percentage of the time do you say that y'all spend thinking about curation, I guess, right? Versus production and just kind of putting stuff in the pipeline.
I think about it a lot.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
I mean, I'm constantly thinking about things that I think we should do or we should try and do. And there's a real balance there too, because there's a balance between what you would like to do and what is available. What you want to try and go and find, and what is being offered to you. And so Pete has been in the business so long that people will just contact him to say, oh, hey, we have this available. Are you interested in doing it? And that sometimes it's even things that he's never even heard of. Like we did a Greek movie called Lovers Beyond Time. It's only on DVD. It's never been a huge seller. And it's not a masterpiece or anything, but it's a really weird, interesting little film that we had no idea about, but somebody just actively contacted us, the director himself, who was a fan, and said, are you guys interested? And so sure. But I mean, then there's just also cases where it's like, okay, we're going to dig for years and try and find who owns these films, or try for years to contact particular studios or companies, just sending email after email, year after year, trying to get a response. And eventually they will, in some cases, eventually they will. Like Video Mercury in Spain, they did a lot of the Spanish films that we've done. That took years of emailing and going back and forth to finally cultivate it. And now they're, not only a company that we work regularly with, but that Severin and Vinegar Syndrome also work regularly with.
I think the first
they would not have that without us. They wouldn't. I mean, I don't know if they would think that, but we sort of pioneered that connection.
Okay, I'm so glad you said that. So I typed this comment in. I sent I sent you a list of like some of the questions that people had and stuff, just to kind of prepare for this. And one of the ones that people said was, tell him what he's doing is amazing. I love Mondo Macabro. They need to know this, right? So my response was, just to kind of tie into this, I said, I agree, their curation game is unparalleled because they're the ones that are like deep in the jungle of obscure cinema, trying to make it easier for future labels to find good content.
Well, thank you. That's awesome to hear, and that's what we want to hear for sure. I mean, that's what we're trying to do.
But like, it's amazing to think about. Okay, this is like the most commonly cited example, right? But for Your Height Only, for example, right? In theory, that could easily be an Arrow release. That could easily be a Vinegar Syndrome release, Severin, whatever, right?
Which one?
But like, for Your Height Only.
Oh, of course. Okay, yeah, the Filipino
right?
movie.
Yeah, it has all the qualities that like any of these companies would be salivating over in terms of commercial viability, I think, right?
Right.
I don't know if it sold well. I just think as soon as you hear about the movie, you're like, yeah, I want to see that. But y'all found it, right? I mean, this is what I feel like so many of your titles, but y'all found it. Like you're the ones that kind of uncovered it.
Yeah, I mean, again, that was something that Pete had done back in the old days, and I think that was. I'm not sure if he certainly was aware of that film because he wrote about it in the Mondo Macabro book. And I'm not sure if he went looking for it or if it was just a byproduct of becoming, forming a relationship with the Dick Randall people, the Dick Randall estate.
Oh, okay.
The kind of legendary kind of trash producer, American trash producer who worked in Europe and Asia in like the 80s. He developed a relationship with that company. I'm kind of blanking on the name of the company at the Film Spectacular or something like that. I can't remember. But he cultivated a relationship, and we actually did several movies by them, including the French Sex Murders and Girl in Room 2A and a few other things. Living Doll was one back in the DVD era.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I honestly, I don't know if that was a case of him finding them to specifically find that film, or if he developed the relationship and was like, oh, you have this film, we want to do it.
I mean, either way, I think it's just a great example of, just it just feels like y'all are kind of ahead of the game always in finding this content that's going to be, for the right type of fan who's basically seen a lot of, Kurosawa films, right? And then they go down and they're like, okay, what's next? And they've seen the Leone films, and then they've like, they kind of start getting deeper into like, maybe like all of a sudden you get into Nico Masteraki's a little bit, and you're like, okay, that's pretty weird. And then you start looking for like what else is out there, And by the time you get there, you're like, y'all are already there, and there's already a Blu-ray of it, or there's already a DVD of it. I think I don't know, that's the part that's always been so impressive to me.
Yeah. I mean, it honestly is getting harder and harder to do that, because I mean, there are a lot of companies out there, and a lot of them are digging in the same ground that we are, trying to find the same, veins of gold. So it's getting harder and harder, but there are still untapped areas out there, and there's still things that we're out there trying to do, and still making connections all the time. So
Well, speaking of that, so one of the questions I had that kind of ties into one of the questions people had about Indonesian cinema that you put out before is, are the rights and sort of that relationship with the producers, or the rights holders, whoever that might be, and the filmmakers, does that vary by country? Does it vary by sort of like era, like, or both? Like, is every time you reach out to somebody, is it a completely new experience, or are there some common patterns there by country? Like, how does that kind of work as go into these different pockets of world cinema?
I mean, I think there are some broad patterns that can be discerned country to country, like dealing with an individual country. But really, it's owner to owner. It,
Yeah.
it, it really is, depending upon the company, or sometimes it's not even a company. Sometimes it's just a grumpy old film producer who just owns movies, and hasn't really even thought about them in years, probably. But so it really is a case by case basis. Um, so I don't know if that really answers the question so much, but yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. When you for the ones like, let's just take Indonesia for example, because that's one I feel like I don't know that there's another company, possibly. There was that big movie, The Year of the Living Dangerously. I think that's a kind of a studio release, but I mean, there's not a lot of like well-known cinema coming out of Indonesia, right? But it seems like y'all have a fair amount, at least in your DVD collection. And one of the questions was, are y'all planning on releasing some of these films on Blu-ray? Are you able to kind of speak to that at all? Is that an area where you're going back to at all?
um I can say maybe.
Okay.
I mean, I can't. I mean, it's not that I want to be really coy about it. It's just that we don't have a deal in place at the moment, but it's possible that we will. Um,
Okay.
we do have a long-standing relationship with Rappi Films. They're the ones that do Mystics in Bali and The
Yeah.
Warrior and Virgins from Hell, and a few other films. And we know that they have HD masters for a lot of stuff now.
Yeah.
In fact, I mean, we aren't the only ones who have done Indonesian films. Severin have done. They did Primitives and Satan's Slave. If you've gotten those or are familiar with those.
That's right. Now that you say that, I do remember they put
And
that
in
out.
fact, going back to the previous point, they got that connection through Pete. David Gregory, the head of Severin, they've known each other. I mean, Pete says he's known David since he was a kid. So I'm not sure exactly how, but maybe like since he was a teenager. They've known each other a long time, and it was Pete who set David up with that contact to put those movies out on Blu-ray with nice new HD transfers. So it is possible, but we haven't done the deal yet. And of course, the one that everyone is always going to ask about, and it was even the first one that you listed on your question, is Lady Terminator. And I can say we have no plans for that, unfortunately. That's not owned by Rappi Films. That's owned by somebody else, who's maybe not personality wise necessarily. I don't know, nothing like that, but more difficult to deal with.
Okay.
In terms of like money and materials and you know and things like that. So
Well, one of the things I thought was so interesting is I remember the range, and you don't have to answer specifics. You know, everybody has a different comfort level with this, but when you actually talk about the cost of acquiring the rights to these movies, I've heard crazy things as low as like $2,000 for a set of 5 movies, with the agreement that you're going to put all 5 out, all the way up to Peter Jackson asking for essentially like 150,000 a movie, you know, for his older like kind of early horror films. That just seems crazy to me. Like, is there at least a range that y'all are typically within
there
there? Like,
there is a range. It's more towards that bottom,
okay,
that that bottom number. Although $2,000 for 5 films, I have never heard of anything so cheap. But it's closer to that than 100,000. Although I am aware of certain companies paying that much for some films. We don't we That's way out of our league. And you know, I don't, I, you know, obviously I can't really speak any more specifically about it, but it definitely is in that range. That's closer to, you know, to the 5 to 15,000.
that's cool. Yeah, I appreciate even that. It's just interesting more than anything else to think about some of the business side behind this, right? Speaking of the business side, I'm curious, just to go back really quickly. I meant to ask this when you talked about the red cases. So, you know, pretty much across industries right now, across food and toilet papers and everything, they're talking about supply chain shortages, right?
Oh yeah.
So, are you kicking yourself during COVID that you have red cases to put out, or is that and not been impacted by?
Well, the good thing is we bought just a ton of them. Uh,
Oh, okay,
yeah.
okay.
So yeah, so we have, as far as I know, we're well supplied with those, probably
Oh,
for another year or so. We know though though that those are going to run out eventually. Um, we thought they were going to run. We've thought probably, I guess, a couple of times now that they were going to run out, but we've been able to source more of them. So, but I'm guessing that eventually we will run out and have to figure out something else. Yeah, slip
yeah,
cover. Yes, we'll do slip covers.
yeah, so that was there you go. Yeah, exactly. That's funny. Okay, so in is as you progressively seen like crazier and crazier stuff and put out, you know, crazier stuff in terms of content of the films, is it possible that you're shocked anymore? Is there any is it possible for you to be shocked anymore?
Well, I mean, a little bit. I don't know exactly what you mean by shocked. I mean, I don't get shocked by I mean, sometimes shocked as in like, you know, I don't know. But there's one every once in a while. Like we did the movie Blood Spattered Bride, which is a great film, but I hadn't seen it in years. And I watched it once we got it, and I'm not heavily involved in the production of things, so that's mostly Pete. So
Mhm.
really often I won't see the face until I get the final product in my hands. And you know, I watched that movie with my wife. She watches all the Mondo stuff. She's very cool. She really likes to see these cult movies. There's one thing she doesn't like, and that's animal cruelty and animal death.
Oh yeah.
And there is an instance of really horrible animal cruelty in that film, and so that is shocking. I'm not exactly sure if that's precisely what you mean, but that's like, I mean, that is the one thing that shocks me as far as being like, I don't want to say offended because it doesn't offend me necessarily, but it's not something I want to see. Um,
Yeah, it's animal is the line. It's so funny that, right? Because that's uh I'm kind of similar to that. Like within reason. I mean, I don't like to watch people actually getting tortured or something, but like within reason, it takes a lot to kind of bug me as far as something happening to another human on screen.
yeah,
Um, but animal stuff is almost instantly. I'm like, nope, nope, nope. Fast forwarding. I don't need to see this. Um, yeah. Anyways, that was I was just curious what the answer was. I as anyways, I feel like it's a pretty universal sentiment, which is speaks well to the human connection to animals. I guess it's
Yeah.
you can put up with another human getting almost anything happening to them, but don't mess with the animals.
But I guess if you mean like shocked as in like, oh my God, what a weird movie. I mean, that does happen too, with stuff. Probably one of the most recent cases that, I mean, it's a couple of years old now, but the movie Killer of Dolls just shocked me with just how outrageously strange and unusual it was. So, I mean, these things can, I mean, you know, I'm still surprised by even movies that we put out. I had not seen that movie previous to us putting it out. So there's still surprises to be had for sure.
That's good. Okay, so speaking to Jared, the fan, not necessarily Jared, the employee, to the extent that you can separate these two, do you have a release that, like, just a personal release for you that you're like, oh, if we ever get to put this out, that'll be my kind of holy grail or whatever?
Oh, like a movie that we haven't done that I would like for us.
Just, yeah, like blank slate, like this is the movie I would put out.
Yeah, if I had to release what if I could pick one movie that I would want to release and do a decked out special edition of, it would be the early '80s Hong Kong horror film Boxer's Omen, the Shaw Brothers film. Yeah, do you know that movie?
I love Shaw Brothers stuff. I haven't seen that one yet. Yeah.
Sure, it's one that's not come out on Blu-ray yet. I can't imagine that at least 88 or Arrow, who both now have relationships with Celestial, who owns all the Shaw Brothers stuff. I can't imagine that one of them won't do it. But it's just this utterly psychedelic, just insane, just horror film with a few martial arts aspects to it. And crazy Buddhist themes and everything. It just is really one of the strangest, one of the most wild films ever. And in fact, an image from it graces the cover of the UK edition of the Mondo Macabro book. If you've ever seen that, not the US, which has the Chinese actor Lo Lei on the cover, but the UK edition has a really wild image, and it's just one. I'm a big fan of Hong Kong movies, and that is probably my favorite Hong Kong film. Period. So and it would fit very well within our brand. So yeah, if I could pick one film, it would be that. Sadly, Celestial has never returned our email. So we've tried. We
Celestial. If you're listening, Celestial, pick up the phone. You want to put out your
yeah, right? Yeah. That's sort of the white whale for me. Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, wonderful. I need to trace it down. I'm sure it has a DVD release, at least from Tartan Asia.
In the 2000s, Image was doing a bunch of those Shaw Brothers things. So they have it. I mean, I think it might be long out of print or something that they just have available as like a DVD-R, made on demand thing, which is what they went to after a while. But you can probably still find it. But like I say, I can't imagine Arrow or 88 won't do it eventually.
Okay.
It might be worth it just to wait.
Okay, well, let's do a tiny quick fire segment here with very direct questions. Okay, and if the answers can't talk about it, that's totally fine. You ready?
Yeah.
What's the release date for Dr. Caligari?
TBD, to be determined. Yeah, we sometime middle of the year, maybe the next Halloween sale in October, this upcoming October. We're not sure yet.
Okay. Can you give any detail about the specifically future Japanese releases? I don't know. I guess it's kind of an open-ended question, but do you have more stuff coming?
Well, at the end of the year, I did a sort of I announced a few sort of things that we were going to be working on over the course of the next year, and one of them was a Japanese film, a film from 1965 called Ghost of the Hunchback, which is a really weird horror film. I mean, obviously, you can tell the filmmakers were very inspired by a lot of the early 60s Italian Gothic horrors specifically.
Okay.
And in fact, for years, the only way you could see it was through an Italian dubbed VHS copy.
Okay.
Somebody
Okay.
had subtitled from Italian into English. But you know, we've worked with a licensor, and it's going to be, you know, in actual Japanese and everything. So very,
Wow.
that was one of the films that I pursued. So I'm very excited about that one. And there'll be another. I at the same time as I licensed that, I licensed a different one, another horror film from Toei Studios at the same time. But I'm going to keep that one under wraps.
It's a nice teaser though. Another Toei horror film. I know they put out a lot, but still, that'll get the imagination going. Okay, and then actually that did make me. I think that's pretty much all. Oh, specifically, there's a Filipino film called Snake Sisters, um, that was rumored. Can you confirm or deny those rumors?
Well, I mean, that one's tough. That was announced years ago, back in the DVD era. And in fact, if you go to even to our to any of our discs that have the more from Mondo Macabro in the extras, it's not quite a trailer reel, but a little like a clip reel.
Uh-huh.
Sister still leads that off. I've asked Pete to take that off, and it's never happened because that's not going to happen. We're never going to release that film, unfortunately.
Okay. Okay.
As to why materials are part of it, but that's not the whole story. There are quasi-legal issues concerning the film that I really can't go into. So, you know, it's a sad thing because I've seen it. The movie is fantastic. It's really original. There's really not another movie like it.
Okay.
And it's sad that it's still sort of put out there as something we're doing, because we will not be doing it, because sort of categorically will not be doing it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, never say never, but that sounds pretty definite.
It
So,
does, yeah, and it makes, believe me, I say that with a heavy heart. You know, so but if anyone is interested in that movie, please check out the other Filipino movie that we've released if you haven't, Silip, Silip Daughters of Eve, which is my I think I have two or three favorites, and that is one of them, of films that we've done. So it's an extraordinary movie. Yeah.
I praise. That was actually out in the last like 2 or 3 months, right?
It was out more in the kind of middle of last year. Yeah.
Okay, maybe 6 months. And time's kind of running together. Okay, but I remember that announcement actually.
Yeah.
What then? The only other one. This is more of a personal one. I feel like, and you know, again, maybe this is just perception on my part, but I've been collecting since 2001. That's the days when you basically everybody was releasing everything, right? Large editions, large prints, whatever. People were snatching up a bunch of stuff, and then, like you said, it had this big dip. But it feels like, from my perspective, that there's more people getting in the game, more obscure stuff coming out that hasn't been released in 15 years, 20 years. If it sometimes didn't even have a DVD release. It feels in a big way like it's kind of coming back, maybe in smaller numbers, but things are really kind of coming back, and people are willing to take some creative risks now in terms of releasing. So that's, you know, I do want to talk about that for a second, but really quickly, part of that is I see more and more box sets coming out, and I was wondering if that's something that y'all were ever going to get into, kind of in a more serious way, where just more like the hard box, or those kind of box sets.
We will be doing a box set in 2022.
Oh, there we go. Okay, great.
First ever. Yeah, we will be doing it. Yeah.
Is that tied to kind of my first question, kind of, or is it just coincidence that just the material?
There's just a set of films that we have that go easily. They were all from the same licensor, all from the same country, all just something that goes together well. The economics of it just works out that it makes sense for us to release them in one set. And honestly, that's a big part of it, is the economics of doing box sets.
Sure.
We're sort of work at a smaller level than a lot of the other labels. But the fact that so many box sets have been so seemingly so successful for other labels has really driven me to suggest that, hey, we have these films that would work together as a box set. Why don't we do it? So there definitely, we are the wave is cresting right now, as to the sort of what you were speaking to before, as just to the popularity of things right now. I mean, you're absolutely dead on. It's really come back and fervent in a way that it wasn't in the 2000 DVD heyday. It was, it's, which is good and bad. But you are absolutely correct. Things are really cresting right now, and there's a lot of stuff coming and a lot of possibilities, and and we'll be, just lay it down on the line, a lot of money to be had. Not nobody's getting rich, but people are making money doing this now. So it's an interesting time.
And also, I'm so glad you used the word fervent, because that's the thing that I think back in 2002, 3, 4 was when I was probably the biggest round the first time. And I felt like there was such a wide variety. You would go to, like, at that time, I think it was DVD Beaver, and there was another one. Um, Shoot. There was another website. The guy named Bill ran it. He might still even run it. But they tried to capture every single DVD release that came out. And I can't believe I spent every day of my life on this site for 3 years. It'll come back to me here in a second.
Yeah, sure,
But
yeah.
it was hard to kind of focus, because there was just so much coming out, and there was so many cool editions coming out and big boxes and whatever. It was just kind of all over the place. But I feel like this time it's become a little bit more focused, maybe towards the boutique area instead of like the big studios doing it. And so it's able to be, like when people are excited for the new Severin Al Adamson box set, or whatever, that's like, it kind of catches people's attention for a few weeks, and then everybody gets it and it sells out, and they're on like, what's the next one? It has like a different vibe to it.
Yeah, there's very much a flavor of the week kind of thing going on. But it's exciting, and I think social media has a lot to do with that. There's just places where it's, you can be on a social media site, and there are even a good few sites that are able to sort of centralize a lot of that information, a lot of the announcements and things. It's easier to keep track of than it was back in the 2000s now. I mean, that was one of the things that I did with the blog that I mentioned earlier, was I tried to sort of get news from everywhere all across the web and sort of put it in one place for specific kinds of movies, these sort of foreign cult films. And now that's just sort of everywhere. I mean, there's 20 different sites on Facebook that will do exactly that, So
yeah, it's exciting though. I like it. I'm glad to hear that y'all see it as well. I mean, as far as you specifically, but also like the more general you on the publishing side, the production side, because it certainly feels that way from here. Are you selling out of these limited editions as they come out now? Are they selling well,
I think,
generally speaking?
yeah, for the most part, yeah. Some obviously some sell better than others. Some we don't, some we put out and we're like, yeah, this is really gonna sell, and then it sort of flops. They sell out eventually. They always will, because there are a limited number of them. But and it's hard to tell. Like, the most recent one that was kind of curious for us was Designated Victim, which is Italian sort of giallo with a it's sort of vaguely based on Hitchcock's Strangers on a Train. And it's a great movie. It has Thomas Millian in it, and it's a really moody, elegant film. And we thought, giallo connection, Italian, early 70s, Money in the Bank, right? Not really. Yeah. We did 1,500 of the limited editions, and I still have about 120 left. So, but on the other hand, the retail edition is sold pretty well. So when it came out in retail, maybe it was just that people didn't want to take the chance on spending, $30 on the retail edition. So, but or on the limited edition.
Right. Interesting.
It's hard to tell.
Well, I just have again, I'm just one person, but reading the tea leaves, it feels like Mondo Macabro is about to have a big year, and I do hope that happens for y'all because more and more buzz on. I'm pretty active on boutique Blu-ray and DVD collection. A few of these subreddits that have a couple 100,000 members, or at least tens of thousands of members, and like it feels like more and more there's excitement around. Oh, look at Mondo's new announcements, or like the I forget if it was the December or January, excuse me, like the bundle it had, here's the four that came out with Succubus and School of Death and Laughing Woman and Hiruko. Like, so, you see, like to your point on social, you see this pop up, you see people get it. People are, oh, I'm so excited about what Mondo's doing. So it just kind of feels like this buzz is like people are just waiting to kind of start buying your stuff. So I hope that happens. Last question I had, I'm just curious because you're obviously so heavy into physical media. And if you already do this and I didn't see it, deep apologies. Are you getting into the streaming game in a big way at all? Or is that something that y'all are thinking about?
We've been really hesitant to
Okay.
um, I mean, for one thing, we don't always negotiate for those rights. Usually when we're getting rights for films, we're just getting physical media rights, solely
Mhm.
media rights. Sometimes we do. I mean, we do have some things that are that is just bundled in, or we might. There are a few films we essentially own in perpetuity that we could put on streaming platforms, but we've been hesitant to do it just because there's just no money in it. There really isn't. And we feel like if something is available to stream easily on a platform, is that going to make people less likely to want to buy our Blu-ray? And
Mhm.
something that's actually going to make a little bit of money. So that's why. But we're not completely opposed to it. We Pete and I talk about it about once a year or so. We do
Okay.
talk about it, and we both get emails of people who are interested in doing some of the films. And like I say, sometimes we just can't because we don't have those rights.
Yeah, sure.
But eventually we will. Dr. Caligari is a good example. We own that film now. So that is ours that we can do whatever we want with. We have worldwide rights. And so we're going to do some theatrical stuff with that.
Oh, cool.
And probably it will end up on some streaming platforms eventually. But the physical release will be the main focus of our attention.
Well, I'm in my day job. I'm in a training course right now, kind of a management type training course, I guess. And it's sponsored by Harvard, and they did a bunch of research into companies that sort of adapt and change, well over time. And one of the things that is consistent with all these brands and companies is the ability to test and like the willingness to test. So maybe Dr. Caligari is the one that you test and kind of put your toe in the water a little bit and see how it goes.
Yeah,
Um,
we'll see. We'll see. I mean, I think we're both Pete and I are both sort of old school in that sort of thing. I mean, I use streaming just like everybody, but I'm a physical media guy, which is why I got into this business. So
yeah.
it's we're both sort of stubborn and old fashioned in that way. So, but it's something you have to deal with. It is the elephant in the room as far as cinema is concerned. Everything is streaming now. I mean, so we can't ignore it forever.
Speaking of, thank you for willing to go down that rabbit hole with me. Speaking of you being a collector yourself, where do you store your collection? Is it in boxes? Is it on a shelf? Where do you have it?
Well, we just bought a house in May of this year, and one of the things that we were looking for was a room that I could specifically put up shelves and have enough room to put up like everything that I have. And we did that. So we bought a house. There's a room upstairs that we hired somebody because I'm not handy really at all. We hired
Uh-huh.
to put up shelves for us, and it's sort of my happy place. I just sort of sometimes go up there and just walk the shelves and just sort of dust the movies and just sort of look at them and everything. Look at my complete Mondo Macabro collection and just admire it. So yeah,
Yeah.
a room pretty much solely dedicated to it. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. I love it. My wife thinks I'm crazy sometimes because I'll go in and I'll just like like kind of run my hand along stuff and pull stuff out, just like kind of play with it. Just like,
That's the
are you
kind of the
fixing
great
it?
thing about physical media is the sort of tactile sensation of
I love it.
self, you know?
I love it. Are there other labels that you're big on collecting outside of Mondo Macabro?
What? Oh yeah, of course. I mean, uh, going back to the DVD era, the Something Weird releases, you know, Something Weird video,
Yeah,
the kind of the official things they did through Image. I'm a
yeah.
collector of those. I'm not really necessarily seeking a complete collection because there's just so much of it, but that is something that, you know, always, you know, every once in a while we'll go on eBay and try to find things I don't have. So that's a big thing that I still collect, and was another big inspiration for me early on. Something Weird. So
That oh, sorry. I love Something Weird, and they're partnered pretty closely with Agfa now, right?
yeah, yeah.
And that guy, his last name is escaping me right now, but he's passed on, but his wife is now kind of keeping that
Mike
alive.
Mike Vraney was the guy.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah, and his wife is a good friend of mine, Lisa Petrucci. It's
Patricia.
really
That's it.
sad because they are based in Seattle. Um,
Uh,
and there were two times that I was in the same room as Mike Franey and neglected to talk to him. Just I'm kind of a shy guy, to be honest. And once it was a comic book store that I just happened to be in, and he went in and he was like, I think he was like selling a bunch of his old comics because he was a big time comic book collector.
Okay.
And so, and I really wanted to go up to him and do like Something Weird video, you know.
Mhm.
But he was having a conversation with somebody, and I didn't want to interrupt. And there was another thing where he sort of gave a talk about Grindhouse Cinema um, at the Fantagraphics bookstore in Seattle.
Okay.
And again, there was just so many people there. I just, you know, I didn't want to. Yeah, I just didn't. And of course, I came to really regret that because he did die, um, which was very, very. That hit me hard because he's someone that I really looked up to. But like I say, I have gotten to know his wife, and it turns out before I moved and before we moved to Olympia, we both lived in the same neighborhood, actually.
No way.
Yeah. So yeah, and actually, there's lots of weird cult movie people who have lived in that neighborhood too. It's sort of weird. Norm Hill, who ran Subversive and worked for Anchor Bay, and did a lot of work with getting a lot of the David Lynch movies on DVD back in early days. He also lived in this neighborhood in Seattle. Um, and then a few other people too, but that's a tangent. But yeah, Something Weird is hugely important to me, and um, I'm really happy that I've gotten to know Lisa. She's a good friend now, and she's a really interesting person, and we actually did a Something Weird release. So
Well, which title was that? I
was
want to make sure I put that.
The Ravager and the Bushwhacker.
Okay.
Not great movies by any means. Both sort of late '60s, early '70s roughies that were almost like proto slashers.
Yeah.
That I just bought the prints off of Lisa and had Agfa do the.
Uh-huh.
And we did a 1,000 Blu-ray edition. One of our worst selling releases.
Well, I'll go find it though. The thing that I love about that is like, okay, so recently with through the Vinegar Syndrome kind of partnership, or whatever the partnership that they have there, I got an early copy of Bat Pussy, and I put it in, not really fully knowing what to expect. Something about. Have you seen that movie, by the way?
I haven't. I've been scared.
Uh, it, it's just, I mean, it's essentially, I don't know how long it is, an hour or whatever, and 55 minutes is just this kind of older couple rolling around, sort of having sex, hurling like nasty insults at each other, like super harsh, like terrible things they're saying to each other. And it took me a few minutes to adjust, but I was like howling. Like the movie's amazing, and I think there's something about a lot of those something weird, because Alamo Draft House here in Austin used to host a lot of they had this thing called Weird Wednesdays. They would host a lot of their movies there. And there's something about those movies, I think by the time you see your third or fourth one, like they don't all have to be good. That's not really the reason you go. Like there's just, it's kind of, I don't know, like it's just, you get kind of sucked up in this world a little bit of, these are people's like passion projects and like a lot of home video stuff and like a lot of 8mm. It's just like a whole nother world that you don't have exposure to otherwise. And I really love it.
Yeah, yeah, and it's fun. Bat Pussy was made in Texas, where I mean, do you realize that? Yeah, that it's one of the that's actually one of the most fun sort of areas that Something Weird uncovered was all the Texploitation films.
Yeah.
Of which that was one.
There's oil money here, so there's some wacky stuff that who knows how these things got financed. But anyways, well, look, I asked you for 30 minutes. I think we wound up speaking more than an hour. I find it very easy to talk to you. So sorry that I kind of went over.
Oh no.
Okay, I appreciate that. Look, honestly, like that's you've answered everything. I really enjoyed the conversation. What is something that people should know about what's coming up next, or just kind of like can you talk at all about hyping out? This will come out so we're recording on the 19th. This will be out by probably most likely 3 Fridays from now. So let's just call it like early February.
Oh, cool.
So is there anything going on that you want to make sure people are kind of pointed to?
I think just I think the next Mondo Macabro Red Case pre-order set will be out. Will be sometime in mid to late March, and it looks like it's going to be 3 releases. So that'll be Hotel Fear, which is a late 70s giallo, Strangler versus Strangler, which is a Serbian. I mean, talk about the esoteric. It's an 80s Serbian new wave black comedy thriller.
Wow.
Yeah, definitely the kind of thing no one else is going to be doing.
Sure.
And then also a collection of short films by Bernard Mandico, who did Wild Boys, Altered Innocence, some of their stuff. And in fact, this is sort of a co-production deal with Altered Innocence. So we're doing like a collection of his short films. It's called Apocalypse After. And if anyone is unfamiliar with that stuff, they are just the most surreal, wild things you'll ever see. They're really, really interesting. I hope people don't sleep on this one because it's going to be a really cool, really unusual release. So those will be on our next 3 releases, and then probably another 3 or 4 will happen not too long after, in probably May or June.
Okay, awesome. Well, Jared, thank you so much for the time.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me.
Of course.